Today's podcast is sponsored by Slaughter and Sons Undertakers, suitable whether you've been fried by dragon breath, nibbled by piranhas, immersed in acid, or pincushioned by goblin arrows. Special deals are available for mummification, Viking funerals, burial at sea, and other assorted death rituals. This week only, Slaughter and Sons also has a buy one get one free offer in the event that you have an elderly or just slightly annoying relative who you'd like to, just dispose of. Just quote the promotional code, Slaughter My Relatives, when making your booking. Give your loved ones the send-off they deserve at Slaughter and Sons.
Hello, and welcome to Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG talk. I, as always, am Morrus, aka Russ, or Russ, aka Morrus, and with me, as usual, is my co-host, best known as the inventor of oxygen.
Peter Coffey from the Southampton Guild of Roleplayers. Some said it was Lavoisier that discovered oxygen back in 1718, but they're just wrong. It was actually me. I travelled back in time in order to show him. It's just one of those things.
So, Peter, I see you brought with you a pair of guests this week.
I know, they followed me. Can I keep them?
We get some funny expressions now.
I do funny expressions. It's just my face. It's how it works. But we have, so excitingly, Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor, who have done such exciting games as Honey Heist, Adventure Skeletons, and a little game called The Spire, which we may talk about in some depth later.
Okay, then. Hi, guys.
Hello.
How are you?
We followed that man in here. He laid a trail of shiny dice, and we were unable to not gobble them up.
That's how he lured me in too. It's quite disturbing.
We are lost and very far from home.
I normally use chocolate biscuits, but budget cuts.
Well, yeah, fair. I mean, thank you for getting half decent dice. Anyway, so we write games, we record podcasts. We do... Chris, what do we do?
Mainly just that. I mean, that's literally all we do all day.
Yeah, okay. Is there like a précis we can offer for people?
It's not a bad life. It's all right.
Nah, it's pretty solid, honestly.
It's the best available,
yeah,
I should say.
So you could describe yourselves as role-playing game industry professionals. Forgiven values of professional.
Yeah, definitely.
Technically, yes.
I mean, I like to say we're rising stars. Because that gives us a lot of room to manoeuvre.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Let's go with that, shall we?
Yeah, let's stay with that.
Ambiguity. It's a strong choice. All
right then, let's get on with the show. So, Peter, what's caught your eye in the world of RPGs this week?
Well, something I saw that was very exciting was a big old vertical battle map. And what it's got is somebody had some guys that were being chased by a major demon, and they were like, we can't fight this. Run away. And so they bravely run away. But to do this, they have to make their way down a series of ledges and throw down ropes. And to do this, they've actually got a big sheet of paper with polystyrene blocks attached to it. And then the little Lego minifigs and bits of string representing the ropes. So what they're doing
so it's 3D?
Yeah, it's 3D.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, It's like up against a wall. I think they might have been using Simba, the Cup and Lion King sloth plushie, to represent the Demon Lord, but I think that just adds sort of the similitude, really.
Fair enough.
I don't think people should really put that sort of stuff about, because I don't prep for my adventures. I'm lucky if I come up with NPCs on the bus on the way in, and these people building whole mazes out of polystyrene, and then basically building a Blue Peter spelunky.
Just makes the rest of us look bad, doesn't it?
It does look terrible.
I know, right?
People are going to see it, and they're going to be like, oh, where's our 3D map? Shut up. As an innkeeper, he's got a quest for you.
So did you guys spot anything?
Did
you guys spot anything in RPGs this week you'd like to sort of like bring to our attention?
Yes, I did. In fact, we both saw this morning.
Okay.
Because I think Chris might be picking the same thing. It's a game called Never Going Home. And it's a World War occult role-playing game, which is quite neat. So it's all done, it's got this really nice, manky-looking art where people are using the occult to try and win wars, or more accurately, survive in World War One. There's lots of gas masks and antlers and mud, and it comes with these absolutely gorgeous playing cards, which look like 1910 era playing cards, but they're used to power the game. And what was it, Chris? Like they form relationships, and you have to spend those to
so
power
The
Power
playing
stuff?
cards that you hold in your hand are like your memories of humanity, of what it was like not in the war, not against these weird monsters and stuff. And you have to use them to boost your rolls to succeed in really difficult situations. But also it's your XP system, so you have to give up your old life to get more powerful. And it's a really nice little mechanic that really sort of drives home that nastiness of being in the trenches, plus great old ones.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's got sort of alienation has a experience gaining mechanic.
Yeah, exactly.
The further you alienate yourself from who you were, the more powerful you become in the game, but the less you are yourself.
Yeah.
I love the name of it,
it's
Never
pretty
Going
neat.
Home.
Yeah.
It's not really encouraging, is it?
No, it's not the most hopeful of names.
I will say that is actually, I was thinking when you were saying that, it sounded like a World War One game to me.
Well,
Maybe that's just
bang on the money there.
Wow. So do you want to hear what caught my eye this week?
Oh, go on then, if you must.
Well, you know what today is?
Remember.
The 5th of
The
November.
5th of November.
Have a good November, as the poem goes.
That's how it goes, yeah. So it's Guy Fawkes night. Well, as of today when we're recording this, anyway. So I thought I would round up 3 games that I thought might be fun to sort of run intrigue and skullduggery type medieval plots in.
Okay.
So the 3 systems that... So I glanced around. These are obviously not the only 3 systems that can do this, but they're the 3 that sprung to mind.
Okay.
So the first one was Blue Rose's... Green Ronin's Blue Rose, which is kind of... They call it a game with romantic fantasy, but it kind of focuses on types of relationships, which like include political relationships, social relationships and stuff like that. And I thought it could be fun to try and run a sort of intrigue, political, sort of Guy Fawkes style game using that system.
If I remember correctly, rulership of the main nation in Blue Rose was determined by a deer.
Well, the current version uses their adventure game engine. I can't even.
Yes.
It's just I've got a cold. It makes me unable to talk. It's my excuse this week. I can't talk any week, but my excuse this week. Last week I had a hangover. This week I've got a cold.
It's all excuses for you, Martin.
Yeah. So the next one is one that I've never actually played, but it's Robin D. Laws's Hillfolk. I don't know if any of you guys have played that one.
Haven't played it, but read it at length.
But it's powered by the drama system, which sort of focuses very heavily on the sort of role-playing aspects of things. So I thought that could make a sort of really, really good intrigue, espionage type game. And then finally, of course, is the Gumshoe system, which is pretty much designed around investigations and sort of heavy plots and things like that, spies and thrillers. So if you did have some kind of gunpowder plot in your campaign, I reckon something like the Gumshoe system would be perfect to sort of track down Guy Fawkes and then burn him on a large bonfire. Oh, well, anyway, that's what caught my eye this week. Bonfire Night somehow caught my eye this week.
Well, it's loud enough.
It was pretty loud last night. Shall we do the news?
Oh, I suppose we could do the news. This is a news podcast.
We don't have to do the news, but I thought it might be an idea.
Seems
It's very
traditional.
conformist. Well,
news.
I suppose if it's traditional.
Chris, have you seen any news? Because I haven't really seen any news for a very long time. I'm worried about this section.
You try and stay
I'll tell you
well
what,
out of the news.
The good part is I'll be telling you the news.
Oh,
And
thank
then
God.
you can offer sort of educated comments on that news. Or if they're not educated comments, you could just sort of just say what you like. I'm sure.
We can tell you what we reckon.
Yeah, exactly.
We can
Or just
reckon
make stuff
pretty
up.
hard.
Or just make stuff up.
Exactly.
Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Do we all know what that is?
No.
No.
So that is Wizards of the Coast's upcoming D&D offering. Comes out
I
next
see.
week,
We
I
should know
believe. Great big mega dungeon set beneath, what is it? Waterdeep.
Waterdeep.
Yes, of course. I knew that.
Yes, it's exciting.
So we managed to get hold
For many reasons.
of a list of all of the dungeon levels in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So there's 23 of them. So I won't sit here and read them all out because you'd probably, fall over from boredom. Your eyes would glaze over and you start drooling or something. But obviously, Undermountain's been around for years and years and years in the Forgotten Realms setting. This is the latest interpretation of it. So you can go online and you can see older versions of it with similar but slightly different dungeon level lists. So this is the latest one, and it has sort of levels like the Arcane Chambers, Mad Goth's Castle, the Troglodyte Warrens, Caverns of Ooze, Shadow Dusk Hold. But we'll stick a link in the show notes to that, and you can pop online and have a look and see the whole list of all 23 levels there.
I can't wait to go to Caverns of Ooze.
The Caverns
that sounds like fun.
That's good.
Bet there's loads of good NPCs there.
Excellent holiday destination, that one.
Yeah, they've got some like fairly decent ideas going on. There's like we've already seen almost a Spelljammer-esque pirate ship that's crashed somehow into a dungeon underground, probably because it's been sucked in for a portal.
That is the Caverns of Ooze level, actually. Yeah.
Oh.
It's got that.
Oh, well, there you go. Then you get spaceships and ooze.
It's gone up my estimations.
Oh, okay.
It's got that Mind Flayer Spelljammer captain. Although one improvement on a Caverns of Ooze, you might enjoy Slither Swamp. That sounds lovely.
That just sounds awkward.
Sounds absolutely.
Well, I mean, maybe it's got a very low ceiling, so you just have to slither your way through it.
I just think that dungeon's got about 22 too many levels.
Yeah, I mean, Dungeons Mad Mage is notable because it's the first time Wizards have done content officially above 15, which is...
Oh, really? That's actually like an epic level sort of thing?
Yeah, it goes from 6 to 20. It follows on from Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is quite a pretty book and has a lot of free playability in it, depending upon it's themed on the seasons. So, yeah.
I just think it's been 15 years since I've done a dungeon crawl.
I like the occasional dungeon crawl. I mean, I couldn't do it all the time, but, once in a while, a dungeon crawl would be really good fun.
Bit of underground Vietnam. Always good for a laugh.
Something like that. I don't know what that even means, but yeah. I'll just say,
You're underground,
in a really enthusiastic manner.
Everything's trying to kill you.
I worry at the idea of having the next 14 levels sort of sketched out for you. I suppose when I go into campaigns, I learned to GM from Chris many moons ago, and when I go into campaigns, it doesn't really bear to think of an ending or what's happening past the next half hour. And so, with players, like the players I have also know that, and we go into very interesting directions. And I think there's something sort of like, it feels chafing to have the next 14 levels just down.
Yeah, I mean,
I really like the idea of a crashed underground pirate ship full of ooze, and there's a Cthulhu pirate, and he's maybe got like a little octopus instead of a parrot. That's cool. But just for that, just give me that. Don't let me go through the other levels.
It's different strokes for different
folks.
Well,
you don't have to.
A lot of these games get live streamed, so they tend to be sort of played through a very sort of structured process anyway.
I can see that actually being rather interesting if you watch 2 different live streams of the same dungeon, seeing how different people
totally
interact with the setup.
Yeah.
And of course you got the Esports that's coming.
Oh yeah, well
D&D Esports.
Yeah.
I was just about to jump into that one as the next news item actually, because obviously we reported on this a couple of weeks ago. But I managed to get hold of them and have a quick word with them and ask them a few more questions about it.
Intriguing.
So as a reminder, this RPGSports thing is a new venture by guys who run D&D Beyond and streaming outfit called Encounter Roleplay. And what they're doing is competitive D&D with a $5,000 prize. $5,000
prize.
I naturally was curious as to how this would work. So I did manage to get hold of it.
Playing it for free like a sucker. Yeah.
I've got this little interview up on my site, which we'll put a link to in the show notes. But I'll really quickly whip through it and do it in as short form as possible. So first of all, I asked them, was it a team event or was it geared at individuals? And they told me it's a team event. There's 16 players with 4 on each team. Most of these players apparently aren't really role players or D&D fans. They're from competitive esports backgrounds, which is interesting.
What?
But apparently they've been reading up on how to do this sort of thing.
I guess they're optimizing.
Yeah. So it's a team event, 4 teams of 4 players. It's a team deathmatch style game of 4 versus 4.
Right.
Oh my god.
They say they've heard requests for things like dungeon runs, like racing through the Tomb of Horrors so you can get through the fastest, and those sort of formats are maybe on their radar for later. But right now, that's what it is. It's a team deathmatch 4 versus 4.
I really like the idea that there's a contest to play Dungeons and Dragons, and the award is given to the team that plays the least Dungeons and Dragons. They get through it as fast as they can.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually, D&D's actually got a history of that, though. Tournament play back in the 70s and the 80s and stuff like that at conventions was very much sort of, geared around that sort of style play.
It feels astonishingly American.
Oh, well, D&D's an American game, isn't it?
I cannot wrap my head around how American this is.
But they have to be using pre-generated characters.
Yes, yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
it's all pre-generated characters that they're picking their teams from. And it's I myself would not have gone with Deathmatch as the first thing.
No.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Did you win initiative?
On the pre-generated characters one, they say they've got 15 of them, which is interesting because there's 16 players. So I'm not sure how that works, but there's 15 pre-generated characters.
One of them plays the game for real.
Well, Wizards have never been very good at numbers, have they?
Yeah, and they say that these pre-generated characters have been chosen to not overwhelm the sort of newer gamers, and also for balance reasons to make sure all the competitors are kind of equally matched.
When you say esports personalities, do you mean like Counter-Strike players?
I'm guessing that's what that means. I'm not 100.
Wow.
I'm not the sort of person who's ever seen an esport in his life, so I can't.
No. Obviously, if you don't know, but
you got like multiplayer online battle arenas, which are team games, and are not entirely dissimilar. Like the Defense of the Ancients 2, that's actually quite good. I mean, it is a game of players competing to be the least bad at the game.
Yes, but there's a very good reason why they don't broadcast the communications between the players anymore.
Still on D&D. We're still on D&D for the moment. Chris Cox, yep, that's his name, who is the president of Wizards of the Coast. He spoke to GeekWire last week, and he's reporting that D&D is up 30% in 2018 over 2017, which is the fourth year in a row that's happened. Nice. He's also said, this upcoming Magic the Gathering D&D crossover, Ravnica. Mm-hmm. He's also said we should expect more of those in the future. Interesting to see.
I mean, more settings are always good.
Well,
yeah.
Well, at the moment, all
good settings are always good.
I don't really know any Magic the Gathering settings myself. I know all of the older D&D settings, but they don't appear to be resurrecting those.
No, so, where's my Ravenloft?
But they did do Ravenloft with Curse of Strahd last year.
Yeah, but that's not. It's not a full setting book.
Yeah. It's like spooky D&D. But yeah. I mean, the thing I like about the Magic the Gathering stuff is it does offer the potential to actually think outside you go into a 10-foot square room and there's a couple of orcs in there just sitting around and waiting to have a fight with you.
It's interesting to see how well D&D is doing, and like it is really dominating as well. I've seen an uptick in people recently trying to convince people that D&D is not the only thing out there.
Yeah, well, I tend to think, although D&D does dominate the market, I'm one of those people that does think a rising tide floats all ship. So the more successful the flagship sort of game in the hobby is, the better things are for the rest of us. I know I've certainly seen that in terms of traffic on my site and how well my own books do, even when they're not D&D. I think it generally kind of tracks a bit with how popular the broader hobby is.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, D&D is the gateway game.
Yeah, it's an ambassador.
It's the game you learn, you start on, and then you go, oh, actually, I like this bit of D&D. Maybe there's a game that focuses on that.
It's weirdly complex for a gateway game as well, if you consider how many rules you have to know to make D&D happen.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because I've run this role-playing game club, and I've got people who come in and they will only play D&D. They won't play any other game. There's some people who come in and like, I want to play role-playing games.
I was thinking about this, Peter, actually. Are these people who have never played D&D before? Are they like, why don't you just play something else and just tell them it's D&D?
Or they played one game, which often translates as I've never played before, or I've played a bit, which means I've seen many podcasts about D&D.
Well, I imagine in a lot of people's mind, D&D and RPGs are, basically synonyms. It's the brand name of the hobby. They don't necessarily know about other games. So you could just play some other game, and as far as they're concerned, they're playing D&D maybe. At least until they learn a bit more about the hobby.
Yeah, just throw Dungeon World at them.
Yeah.
This D&D is about werewolves.
Yes, this D&D.
And there's an apocalypse
This
coming.
D&D is about spaceships.
Absolutely. I think the thing that really appeals about D&D is not actually... I mean, rules-wise, yes, it's complex, but when you're a new player, how much rules do you actually have to know? Not so many. Your DM knows it all. The big selling point of D&D is actually its simplicity. It's moral simplicity. You're a hero. It's
very black and white.
Exactly.
The setting simplicity as well, in that it is all fantasy. Go.
Yeah.
And like the generic setting of D&D is just whatever fantasy your GM's seen recently, and you mash whatever you want into there, and it makes it happen.
Yeah.
And
it's so accessible. Like
everyone
that.
knows what an orc is. Everyone knows what a wizard is, and then you can just get more complex from there on in.
And also the fact that like there's a rule for everything. So when you're starting out, you don't have to go, I don't know what to do in this situation. You've got the book to help you.
Yeah. I mean,
Whereas
I'd say that's possibly true about older editions of D&D. Certainly not the current one.
Yeah.
No, but like
Pathfinder
generally.
and 5th Ed does go more for the rulings rather than rules.
Yes, but when you're playing something like Dungeon World, where you can make up part of the setting as a player, that's a lot to throw on a first-time player.
Sure,
yeah.
Whereas there's probably a rule for it in one of the other D&D editions.
Nathan Stewart over at Wizards of the Coast, he was speaking on a Twitch stream just last week, and he's confirmed there will be a new setting book next year in 2019. He hasn't said what it is, but he has said it is definitely not Spelljammer.
Well, why would you do that?
Because he's
what's wrong with Spelljammer?
He can be a bit of a troll online in the sense that he'll hint at things which aren't going to happen. So he was showing off some pictures of books and things, and there was a piece of paper hidden behind a picture of books, and it looked like part of the Spelljammer logo behind it. This is a couple of months ago or something like that, sparking a whole load of online discussion saying, oh, they're releasing Spelljammer, there must be, why would he do that? And of course he was completely trolling everybody. And when he uncovered it a week later, because you could only see the S, it was the word summer written in...
I was hoping it would be like Spelljumper or something.
But I'm 100% on board for that, though.
So, I mean,
constantly
he enjoys sort of trolling fans a little bit on Twitter, so who knows whether that's true or not, but that's what he said. Every year on EN World, I run a most anticipated game of the next year poll. And I run it towards the end of the year. The poll usually runs through November, and then I announce them in December. That has launched. It's currently in the nomination phase, so anyone who is anticipating a game that is going to be released in 2019 can hop on over and nominate that game. All the games nominated will go into the poll, then we'll do the big poll. We usually get sort of about 10,000 votes or whatever, and then we'll count them down in the podcast sometime during September. Not September, because that would be going back in time.
December.
It takes a long time to count votes.
No, that sounds like that should be a good laugh. Give us a chance to shout out the indie studios and smaller games.
Yeah.
Always fun.
If only they generate some news.
Tell you what always does really well in those polls are the Swedish games. Always. They'll always have 2 or 3 entries in the top 10 for some reason. I mean, they are gorgeous games, but it's interesting how they managed to totally dominate those polls.
Yeah, Tales of the Loop was
lovely,
very popular, wasn't it? And then we've got Tales from the Deluge, I think. Tales of the Flood. That was
some things from the Flood,
expansion.
was it?
Something like that.
Remember.
I think it's Tales.
Yes, they do a whole load of that stuff. Okay, Twitch. That streaming software. So D&D Beyond, which is the sort of digital toolkit for D&D, the official one, and Twitch have teamed up for a Twitch extension, which I believe video games already have these, but I wouldn't know, not having ever watched someone stream a video game. But people watching a Twitch stream can now click on things on the Twitch stream to call up stats and things, so the characters being played and stuff like that as a sort of overlay.
That's actually fairly useful because they do that quite heavily with the Magic the Gathering card game. So you can see what cards are in people's hands and in people's graveyards, and it actually makes it a little bit more interactive.
Yeah.
Admittedly, quite a lot of people in the Twitch chat just going, "You idiot, you played the wrong card." But
Isn't Twitch normally really supportive?
Yeah, they're really positive all the time.
Lovely.
Is that
people.
massive irony? Because I don't know. That doesn't sound
not quite as supportive, I think, as YouTube commenters. They're well known for being a positive punch.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
full of the light and joy of life.
Oh, guys! I found some news that isn't D&D.
Good lord!
Wow!
What is it?
Wow! So there's a board game called Root, ROOT, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know it. But it's getting a role-playing game adaptation, courtesy of Magpie Games.
Oh, great.
So I'm just reading this, but apparently the board game premiered at Gen Con with a release later this month, and it features asymmetrical gameplay between different woodland animals.
Asymmetrical badgers,
Yes.
just the left's a bit lopsided.
Just those stripes just aren't misaligned.
Yeah, it's just not like that.
I've been very ill.
You can live a badger even if it's wonky.
Magpie Games has a multi-year license. It says long-term plans, and there's a Kickstarter for the core rules coming next year.
I'm game. Magpie are a lovely company, and I'm up for any sort of like Fox schemes.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Yes.
A bit like what was it called? The Forest Hymn and Picnic.
Yeah.
Which was kickstarted recently, which is a kind of over the garden wall, wind in the willows, slightly creepy, slightly fairy tale, folk tale-y adventure in the woods, and that had a successful Kickstarter about a month ago, and I'm really excited to play a raccoon with a hat who smokes a pipe.
Yes.
Oh dear, I can just imagine the cosplay.
All body paint.
Excellent.
Nothing else.
All this hair is natural.
Is it bad that I'm getting quite excited? No, I'm not.
Hey man, I'm a beautiful man. It's fine. Don't worry.
I do think that is it for the news. I can't find any more. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Marvellous,
It's
Mark.
always
I
good
can tell
to
you're
end
having
on a down
so
note.
much fun, and I can see the disappointment in your face now that the news segment is over. I am sorry.
I know.
That is it.
What's the next segment?
Is it time?
Shall we play our favourite game in all the world?
But yeah, shall we play our favourite game in all the world?
Okay, our favourite game in all the world, where I read out the name of a Kickstarter and you have to guess what it is from just the name. It's on the honour system. If you've already heard of the Kickstarter and you know what it is, you've got to tell me. No cheating now.
Okay.
What I'll do, I'll just give you one each. That's probably
Could we make up something funny if we know what the real answer
You
is?
could do that, yeah. Why not? Yeah,
Okay,
fine.
cool. Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's this one called, what's this? Strata, a Spire RPG Sourcebook by Grant Howell. No, I don't know what that would be.
The most important thing you're going to read this month. You want some news?
I say roleplay.
Yeah, you want some news? We got some hot news for you right here, buddy.
So I'll give you one each. Right then, Peter, do you want to start? Dinosaur Princesses. I just see the way his face
Possibly
lit
the
up
best
then.
game ever.
Sounds like the best game ever made.
I must play this game. I don't know what it
Move
is. But
aside, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, why wasn't this in the news?
dinosaur princesses in his house. Oh,
Go on,
wow.
what do you think it is?
Dinosaur princesses. Well, I'm hoping it's like using the My Little Pony system, and it's an extension pack for that, because that would be amazing. And you've got dinosaurs, you've got princesses. A lot of it is hopefully in the name. Now, the question is, are the princesses riding the dinosaurs, or are the dinosaurs actually the princesses?
You're the one trying to guess, Peter. You tell me. No, I'm not giving anything away.
Yeah, it's probably for the best. I'm going to nail my colours to the mast here and say, actually, you play as a dinosaur who is a princess living in a saurian society and resolving things until you eventually learn that friendship is magic.
Peter, you have just scored 1,050 points.
Woo! Out of
10.
Hooray!
Dinosaur Princesses, a rules light, collaborative tabletop role-playing game about friends who are dinosaurs who are princesses solving problems together.
Just gonna back this.
That sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm about to say search for that.
The link will be in the show notes. That does sound pretty.
Oh, it's Hamish Cameron.
Oh, do you know?
There's also a little twist. The rule book is also a colouring book.
Get 2 copies,
How
Grant.
good is that?
You're all right.
Two copies.
One that you can ruin.
Yes, yeah. Well, it depends. Can you
I
colour
think that's
between the
what this
lines?
is.
How's your colouring skill?
You don't need to colour between the lines.
I wouldn't want to be bound by these lines. You can't tell
Constrain
me where to colour.
The lord of my
Think of them
domain.
as guidelines.
Okay, 1,050 points. Well done.
Oh, well, thanks for giving me a nice easy one. I thought it might be hard.
Who wants to go next?
I'm game.
Your game? All right. The next one is Dragonflight. What is Dragonflight?
I've got to assume you play a flight of dragons. Like you'd play a small number of dragons. Like you go to a pub and say, and you say, can I get a pint of dragons? Oh, actually, I don't really know which pint of dragons I'd want, and so they'd give you a dragon flight, which is like 3 or 4 quarter pints of dragon on a serving board just to taste.
I love the way your mind works.
Thank you.
Sadly, you are incorrect, but I wish you were correct.
Is it just about playing a bunch of dragons flying around?
Exactly that. Playing a bunch of dragons flying around in D&D 5th edition.
It's no dinosaur princesses.
It's not. Although I like the idea of migrating dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's not even based on Anne McCaffrey.
There's nothing there saying these dragons can't be princesses.
Oh, it depends on their society, I guess.
You'd need the princess template, wouldn't you?
I think you're being unduly prescriptive there. It's a bit unfair.
I mean, just because dragons are traditionally tyrannical.
So is it rules for PC dragons in D&D?
2C Gaming's Dragonflight provides rules to bring dragon characters to your D&D 5th edition games.
That game with Dragonborn in it.
No, I think these are actual dragons rather than Dragonborn, but yeah.
Half dragons.
Like Dragonborn, but they're dad. Alright, well, fine.
You do not sound enthused.
It's like, you're supposed to go into the dungeon and kill the dragon.
Well, in this case, you're the dragon, and you come out of the dungeon and kill the... I don't know.
And take a level in Barbarian? I don't understand.
That sounds fairly easy.
Now, Rogue Dragon, I'm on board with.
Bit of sneak attack, or just has a bonus action. You hide behind a chair.
Flanking maneuvers as a dragon.
You pretend to be a statue.
I'm going to give you 4 points out of 10 for that.
Well, thank you.
Shocking.
Because you did manage to repeat the word dragon from the name, which has to be worth something.
Yeah, it's contribution
I
points.
think that's fair.
I also want you to know, I had actually already seen that and forgot.
I can go one worse. I was on another podcast a few weeks ago, and the guy who runs that podcast listens to ours, and he decided to play this game with me. So he asked me one. I couldn't remember what it was until halfway through I remembered. Not only did I know what it was something I'd actually asked Peter earlier that week. And then completely forgot I'd done it.
It was your Kickstarter.
You wrote the book.
It was a humiliating experience, I must say.
All right, I'm hoping Chris can do better than me because
I greatly doubt it.
We shall see. We shall see. Are you ready, Chris?
Let's go for it.
Okay. What is Table Breakers?
I'm really hoping that it is an incredibly complex wrestling RPG. It's either the world's most complex wrestling RPG, where the only way to take people out of a match is to throw them through a table.
It's like a vampire.
It's the world's most tedious RPG, where you just try and get Excel to work. You're just desperate. Come on.
Do a pivot.
There's
a bad variable somewhere.
So you do have to pick broken. One of those two things.
I'm going to go with the Excel spreadsheets. I think that's the one it is.
Okay, you're wrong. But if you'd gone for the other one, you'd have been wrong as well. Because Table Breakers is a super heavy set of solid metal poly dice.
Hang on. They're advertising that their products are going to destroy something more expensive than them.
Apparently so. Well, I don't know. Is it more expensive? Let's have a look at the price of them.
Well, like I literally said, table's what, £100 to £200.
£33 for a dice.
Don't get me wrong.
It has given me a new idea for a name for my range of lighters.
Don't get me wrong. That's too expensive for dice.
I'm fairly sure I have a table in this house that costs less than £33. I'm almost sure of that fact.
Why would I want something that's...
Russ, does that include shipping cost?
I would imagine not.
It won't include shipping costs with it. No.
Let me have a look. 33
It's going to be loud.
Shipping costs.
Yeah.
Destination.
That's one dice.
Oh, you have to actually back it.
What a colossally bad idea.
Oh, don't do that. Oh, no, sorry. I mean, obviously...
Yeah, don't risk spending money on table destroyers.
It does not include shipping costs. Shipping costs will be on top of that.
Veneer ruiners!
sort of the risk section of the Kickstarter. Risks the dice themselves.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, Chris, you have scored minus 12 points out of 10 there.
Oh, man.
I will take that.
That was good.
So that puts us to minus 8. I think.
I would say it was a good effort, but it wasn't really.
I'm fairly sure that both of my ideas were better than the ideas for the dice.
I actually quite like the look at these, to be honest. I'm actually considering backing it.
Really?
Have you got a table you don't like?
I really hate the stuff in my house.
This table's been walking around like it owns the
Destroy
place.
it.
Get a rock.
Yeah.
Mate, I can sell you a hammer.
I mean, like, how many dice would you normally have? Like 2d6, or like maybe get a set of 10 or something?
For 33 quid?
That's
I'm not sure how many of you.
330 quid.
Put them in a
Plus,
slot.
Well, I've just
50,
checked.
60.
It's £33 for a set, not for each dice. I was slightly wrong.
Right.
It's not quite
okay.
that.
And 600 quid for
cheap at that
shipping
point.
across a continent. Crikey.
Yeah, well, that certainly sounds like it will be a popular one, which we'll all be subscribing.
Yeah. Diving out now.
That was our favourite game in all the world.
I do quite like that game.
Sadly, I have to declare Peter as the winner of that.
Grant looks less impressed, I'll be fair.
I think it's the dice that's really doing it.
Dice that have really bothered me. It's the fact that they're going to destroy
that
your
was
tables.
okay?
You've got to assume I like that table, or it's owned by my
What
landlord.
if it's someone else's table?
That's bad then.
Once again, I could just stand on it.
Yeah, mate, I can write 17 on a hammer and hit a table with it. Oh, I wrote 17.
Okay, you got 17. Okay.
You do
I'm just
seem
gonna sit down
unduly
now.
enraged by these dice.
It just bothers me, you know.
Nothing like a good glass of the finest elven firewater, eh, Lord Grimstaff?
You're right there, Sir Mortimus.
Who'd have thought back when we were just first level, we'd be all sitting here drinking elven firewater?
Aye. In them days, we'd have been glad to have the price of goblin spittle brew.
Cup of cold goblin spittle brew.
In a filthy, cracked cup.
We never used to have a cup. We used to have to drink out of an ogre's boot.
An ogre's boot. The best we could manage was to suck at a troll's loincloth.
But you know, we were happy in those days, though we were low-level adventurers.
Aye. Because we were low level. My old dad used to say to me, gold doesn't buy you happiness.
He was right. I was happier then, and I had nothing. We used to live in this tiny old house with great big holes in the roof.
A house? You were lucky to have a house. We used to live in one room, all 126 of us. No furniture, half the floor missing. We're all huddled together in one corner for fear of falling into a bottomless pit.
You were lucky to have a room. We used to have to live in a dungeon corridor.
Oh, we used to dream of living in a dungeon corridor. Would have been a palace to us. We used to live in an old crypt in a haunted graveyard. We got woken up every morning by zombies trying to eat our brains. Dungeon?
Well, when I say dungeon, it was only an old hole in the ground covered by a piece of cloth, but it was a home to us.
We were evicted from our hole in the ground. We had to go and live in the lake.
You were lucky to have a lake. There were 160 of us living in a small puddle in the middle of the road.
Lucky, lucky, lucky. We lived for 3 months in a used wineskin in a kobold lavatory. We used to have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, eat a crust of stale bread, go to work down the dungeon for 14 hours a day, week in, week out, and come home, only to be robbed blind by a gang of bandits.
Luxury! We used to have to get out of the puddle at 3 o'clock in the morning, clean the puddle, eat a handful of hot gravel, go to work at the dungeon every day for 2 copper a month if we were lucky.
Well, we had it tough. We used to have to get up out of the wineskin at 12 o'clock at night and lick the road clean with our tongs. We had half a handful of freezing cold gravel, work 24 hours a day at the dungeon for 4 coppers every 6 years, and when we go home, we kill to death with a scimitar.
Right, I had to get up in the morning at 10 o'clock at night, half an hour before I went to bed, drink a cup of sulphuric acid, work for 29 hours a day down the dungeon, and pay the dungeon master for permission to come to work, and when we got home, bandits would kill us, and dance about on our graves singing hallelujah.
But you try and tell the low-level adventurers today that, and they won't believe you.
Nope.
well, so obviously, Hearty Dice Friends is your podcast upon which you talk about several things, but probably the stuff that I know you guys best about was when you started working on the Spire RPG, which, because people were talking about it, sounded really interesting. You have a tower full of dark elves that has been taken over by high elves, and then your erstwhile dark elves are leading an insurrection against their fascist overlords. I'm not saying that you're tapping into a zeitgeist or anything, but the idea of dealing with the rise of a fascist state that's oppressing minorities might be something that has struck chords with my political viewpoints.
Yeah. I mean, it's hella zeitgeisty, that's fair.
Yeah.
We were feeling some things.
Yeah. Was that intentional, or did you were you just like thinking, we'll come up with stuff, and then it was just like, or did you say, I don't know, I haven't read it, but I've seen the book. It's actually been a prize at my club, so yeah.
Excellent.
And I've made the guy who won it promise that when he runs it, I will get to be in his game.
Oh, that's nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Significantly easier than
Well,
reading
given
it.
that you gave him the book, I suppose you have some leverage there.
We wrote it in the wake of the Brexit vote and also of the Republican election, the Republican, presidential nomination in America, and so there was a lot of like, oh, hang on, the baddies are winning, and there was also like there was also the creeping, slow realization that, oh, hang on, I thought everyone was basically decent, and it turns out they're not, and so that was quite scary to deal with, and I think that like a lot of the people I was talking to had gone from like, oh, things are bad to things are bad, and so I think there was a cathartic element to having a role-playing game where you get to revolt and that gets to make an impact. You get to make change. And it's a safe space to play that out in, I think. I'm not sure whether it's just like, I'm not sure whether it's blunting our real-world revolutionary attempts or encouraging them. But it's, in fact, the revolution idea was Chris's angle.
Because originally it was more sort of spycraft style. It was much more espionage based. And we shifted it more to the revolutionary angle because there was more traction in it for a game. When you're doing spycraft, you're kind of working on roughly the same level across a game, the same social strata of a game. But when you're downtrodden and beaten up and you're essentially a minority in your own city, then punching up is a good way to get things done. And we wanted to make a game where that wasn't necessarily easy, but it was doable. Because it's a game all about making ridiculously hard decisions and like throwing some of your friends under the bus, essentially, to get what you want and to get more power for yourself. So it's that kind of, it's one of those games that hovers in a moral grey area rather than being black and white, like say, as we spoke earlier about Dungeons & Dragons. But yeah, it's been really fun writing it and really fun seeing the stuff everyone's done with it.
Oh, it's been great.
Like we have a really nice community that we have on Discord, and they have a Google Doc that everybody contributes to, and they create random tables for the setting. Right. So like, one of the things we've done is we haven't nailed down the setting, as it were, in the book. There's no timeline. There's no, this has happened, so you must remember it. Everything's fluid and hooks. Like if you've ever read Trail of Cthulhu, you'll know that in the back of that, like there's 3 different descriptions of what Cthulhu is. Like he's a mimetic virus. He's an actual old god. He's from space, and when we use that a lot. So the Spire itself has 17 different reasons as to why the Spire city exists. And there is no canon answer.
Right.
We don't know.
It's all set up so that a player who comes to it can interpret it how they want.
It's kind of a bit toolkitty in that sense. You can sort of almost create your own sort of settings.
I think hooky I'd go for would be the word.
Yeah, like, because it gives you the basic political structures, and it gives you the NPC groups, and think like West Marches, things like that, where you get a sandbox where there's all the factions and how they move. No, but no actual thing of last Tuesday.
No
this
sort of meta
happened.
plot sort of thing.
Yes, and you can disregard any part of the setting you want to. Nothing is necessarily reliant on the rest.
We wrote it initially with 5, I think it was 4 or 5 levels of detail, and there was one which is if you want to run this as a generic fantasy game, but about revolution, level 1. Right. And then level 2, here's some places. Level 3, here's some locations. Level 4, here's some NPCs. And it was impossible to write or read. So we dialed that back.
It was a monster.
The thought of players writing pages of backstory for one of my games fills me with dread. I find backstory is hugely limiting because that's not the play of a game. You can decide how your character would act in certain situations, but the play of a game is when you sit around a table and you improvise a story with one another. And my favorite way to generate story is, I wrote an article about it years ago. It's called My Mother's Second Best Sword. And that's what you have instead of a sword. And also, you don't explain what it is. Right. You just write down my mother's second best sword. And then you make sure that the GM knows that you've got that. And then you make sure the other players know that. And you leave it there until it coalesces into a story. And I think that's a much more engaging way of being able to tell stories. But it involves a lot of player trust. And it involves a lot of player action in terms of coming up with narrative, like Chris was saying earlier about Dungeon World. So it can be quite scary to a new player to put things forward, but
yeah, it's kind of like
said I've been trained.
It's kind of like filling a character sheet with Chekhov's guns.
Yeah,
right.
Like they're going to come up later in play, but you don't need to know exactly how or what they do
what they exactly
necessarily.
Are. They just,
yeah. And one of the other things we wanted to avoid was anybody in a game ever going, "No, you're wrong. That's not how this works."
Right.
Like. Because in, say, Forgotten Realms, etc., you know that if you go west from a city, there's this enchanted wood.
Right.
If you've read the book and you know that, you can't really do that in Spire because we very rarely actually say the hard and fast geography. We don't often say which way factions are politically leaning. We give hints that you can use. So again, you can disregard large sections of it and just focus on the bit of story you want. Some of the published adventures we've done are one of them is just a bundle of newspaper clippings and then a load of NPCs. So you're tasked with taking over a single district. It's called the Silver Quarter, which I think Fantasy Las Vegas.
And crossed with Fantasy Venice.
So it's casinos and it's high rises and things like that.
Canals.
Yeah. And all there is there's about 5 or 6 major NPCs. And you've got to either like bring them under control of the Ministry, which is the group you work for, kill them, get rid of them.
Ignore them,
whatever you want to do. And it handles that very loosely so that you can have your own story in it. And we keep getting different people's reactions to it when they say, "Oh, this happened in my game." And they'll have an argument with somebody else who's played it. Like, "Who's that? I never even heard of them." Because their DM didn't use them because they focused on the stuff that the players liked each time. And it's been wonderful to see that go through.
Yeah, it's been really exciting.
So what was it? What's a typical sort of adventure or a typical sort of game in Spire look like?
We tend to run online because Chris tends to run online primarily. So
because I live in the woods.
Yes, he lives in the middle of nowhere with wolves. But he so over a 3-hour session, I suppose generally the players will be looking into an NPC in some way who they want to. What's the word? Exploit.
Right.
Effect is the political term.
Yes. So either it'll be, we're trying to assassinate this person, but more commonly, we're looking for blackmail information on them, or we're trying to find a way to give them what they want so then we can get them as a bond and then get deeper into the organization, which is the person we actually.
Right.
There's generally a hurried, brutal fight. One side goes down hard.
Combat is deadly.
Yeah. And the great thing is it's fine until it isn't. Which is my favourite thing about Spire combat is it's like I'm winded, I'm knocked over, my leg's off, and it's like we wanted to make violence like the way that the system goes, you're kind of to blame. Like unless you get hit really hard straight out the gate, you're to blame for your own misfortune because you had the capacity to not get involved in this fight. You had the capacity to walk away or solve the problems beforehand. And so when you do die, your punctured lungs sputtering blood and air out onto the floor, you could have walked away at the start of that. Was it worth it? Yeah. And that's always fun. We learned a lot from Unknown Armies.
So, would you say the game discourages combat then?
No, it sees combat as a tool.
It doesn't glorify it, but it is definitely there.
For instance, each player, they have separate health tracks for a lot of different things. They have blood for health. They have silver for money, so you can get hurt in your money.
I frequently do.
Yeah. For instance, in one game, one character was near an explosion. And it didn't make sense that he was very acrobatic, this character. And it didn't make sense that he blew up and got hurt. So what happened was he took damage to silver as his like really fine coat got burnt.
Right, I see.
And he had to replace it and things like that. And you can drop from being absolutely fine to essentially dead with one sword hit. But you have a lot of ways of mitigating that.
Yeah.
Of getting out the way, of making the weapon hit somebody else. And it's a lot about that, like, well, you want to be fine, right? Cool.
Yeah.
Which one of your friends do you want to die?
Yeah.
And you've always got the option of attempting to resolve things without violence.
Yes.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different abilities and methods in the game for coercion, interrogation, intimidation, flattery, all that sort of.
There's a starting ability for one of the classes which stops any fight. Is our Lady's Peace, and it stops all the fighting in a room. You can't move above a run. It is as damaging as getting shot in the gut to the caster in terms of stress. But you can shut down any fight you're in if you need to. And so, because Chris and I we like making games where you talk to NPCs and where you investigate stuff and set up schemes. Like, honestly, long-winded fights aren't very interesting. I tend to get bored by about round 3. And especially like when I'm GMing, and if I'm GMing, so I ran 13th Age quite a while, which I really rate. But I'd get to the end, and like 13th Age is expressly designed like you've got the escalation dice, so it means that you're hitting more often, you're doing more damage. It's really exciting. But even that, I'd get to round 4. I'd get to round 5, and I'd feel like apologetic to the players that it wasn't over yet. It's I guess we're just going through the thing. And so in all of the work that Chris and I have done, we've tried to think about we're thinking about the ends rather than the means. So it's not hugely interesting to have a fight, but it is hugely interesting to fight for what you believe in.
Okay.
And I think that's what we're going for. We're trying to take the focus off measuring your ranges and what percentage of cover you're in and that sort of thing. Yeah. And it's very abstract.
Because like the standard stress that an NPC can suffer is 3. A sword will do D6. Yeah. So if you're attempting to kill a civilian, as it were, you probably shouldn't be doing that. But if you were, you just hit him with a sword.
Well, to be fair,
well, it depends
most of the times I get hit with a sword, I die.
Exactly.
For sure.
Probably 100% of the time.
Yeah. I can tell you for a fact that I have never ever been hit by a sword and not died. That is a fact.
Prove it.
Yeah, prove it, Forest Fawn. It's one of your fey ruses.
Yeah. You can't see the hooves, but he actually is a forest fawn, so you should.
So you kickstarted this thing, in 2017?
Yeah, last summer.
Yeah,
late
last
and
summer.
You
made something like 75 grand.
We did,
yes.
23, I think, yeah.
Which was quite an astonishing amount of money.
Considering we were coming at it from nobody knowing the IP. Nobody knew the world.
Nobody really knew who we were.
It was, well,
I mean,
some people knew who you
were.
Like,
still people don't
Did you know who each other were? Or...
Yes.
No,
yes,
we actually met at the audition.
We met halfway through the Kickstarter.
Oh, that's good.
It was weirdly that brought us together.
We've been busy mates since 2005, I think.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
And then now you're doing a second Kickstarter at the moment, which is a Sourcebook for the Spire.
Yes, it's called Strata.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Go on.
Strata.
Okay. Well, Peter, do you want to try and tell us about that?
Oh,
What do you
Peter.
think?
I'm intrigued.
What do you think Strata is? And then they can tell us what it really is. What is your understanding of what Strata is?
Yeah, in fact, and we'll give or subtract points depending on how well you guess what Strata is.
That sounds like the way to go.
As long as we win.
Well, I think this sounds entirely fair. If I was going to speculate as to what Strata would be in the context of a game called Spire, which is about a giant tower going into the sky, Strata would be looking at the various levels that you have within the Spire. And that would probably be things like actual potentially physical levels, like where you might have, I don't know, parks or something. Not sure how that would work. But also the physical, not just physical, the social structures as well. Because you'll have different societies will have different, and by societies I'm thinking more in terms of guilds and power structures. Yeah, subcultures, where they might relate and how they are the stratification.
I'm going to stop you there.
It's probably a good idea because he will go on for the next 10 minutes.
It's actually about trifle. We were going to call it layers.
I know,
but they didn't really test very well. No, you're pretty much bang on the money. It is an expansion. We want to write about the richest and poorest places of Spire. So to give the standard pitch for Spire, Spire is a many-mile-high city which is far too tall to exist. Reality's gone off in the middle, like old milk, and it's been a drow city for many thousands of years. 200 years ago, the High Elves turned up, took it over, and graciously allowed the drow to serve there in exchange for a period of indentured servitude. They are bad folks, basically. And Strata is about the high society element. So there's where the high elves come and live. Their district is permanently kept below freezing, because that's how they prefer it. So there's illegally imported magic using which they use very strange, basically air conditioning units to freeze their entire district. They're all very alien and weird, and they all wear masks all the time. So we wanted to try and examine that culture and see what that would feed into. We've got like the various houses of the dark elves. I get very bored when I sit down to read a source book and someone's like, here are the 15 houses of the dragon-blooded families. This one bird, and 700 years ago, this lady married this man. And so what we've got is a paragraph for each of them, and then a slightly longer paragraph, which is an in-game ability you get if you play them.
Right. Okay.
And it's very broad. So it's like if you are from this noble house, you get to have this ability. And so we want to try and keep it very up and focused and ticking over. But some of those guys allied with the Elfir, and so with the High Elves, and so it's about the betrayal stuff. There's a civil war going on in the Dark Elf homeland. So that's sort of turning up in Spire. Then we also talk about the lowest scale of society. Chris, you should take over because I've been talking for years.
Absolutely is. It's terrible. But yeah, looking at the low society is really interesting because we're working really from the bottom of the sump, like scraping the bottom of the barrel and going up. So there's a place like Derelictus, which is essentially a slum. But it's one of the things we want to do is not just tell you what was in there. We want to tell you from the perspective of the people that live there. So it's told by the children who live within Derelictus.
Right. It's not in character.
It's not in character, no.
I can't stand in character stuff in role-playing books.
But it's it's an account of their fairy tales. So they're so far removed from the High Elves that they've never seen one. But they have these legends of these weird golden creatures that occasionally come down
and steal children.
And it's all about that like different perspective of each district. And how the factions interact with them and what kind of stories you can get in there. Because everything, I mean, like Grant mentioned that we have, the noble houses and that you get kind of a paragraph, etc. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's the core. That's like, this house is famous for X, essentially. Mm. And then any other little random piece of information pop up where it's relevant in the book. Mm. So if one of the noble houses has a lot of presence in Derelictus in the slums, then they feature in that section. And it's about that modular nature of the game. You only need that core to just do what you want. But if you want the extra tidbits, you read through. Like, we base a lot of stuff on an absolutely amazing supplement for a game called The Armitage Files. Right. For Trail of Cthulhu, and Dracula Dossier and things like that, where not everything is straight up apparent. And it doesn't have to be. It's about how much you want to read into the setting or not. And it's all interesting to read through. And we've added in extra classes. What we use and we also have extra advances, which are like essentially prestige classes. You have to fulfill a requirement to get into. So we have things like the Inksmith, who's essentially Hunter S. Thompson, if he had access to magic, but a wizard. So you can start changing the narrative of the world around you, and you can force you have buttons to force stories to happen. So let's say you're in some sort of deadlock, like you're tied to a chair and you're being interrogated. There's a power in the game to cause a man with a gun to walk through the door. It doesn't tell you which side of the conflict the man with a gun is on.
Why they have a gun.
Why they have a gun. But what it does is it's a narrative power to force everything to come to a head.
Sure.
Everything's going to explode right now because of this power.
To go full Raymond Chandler.
One of the things we were really keen to do with... so the other thing is we wanted to explain, to talk about the state of culture and fiction in Spire. And so rather than doing a big list, we wrote a class about it. And so all the printing presses are in the industrial section, which, because we like film noir, happens to take place in film noir. So it's all like it's all like gin joints and detectives and that sort of stuff because we think it's cool. And so we have this character who writes these pulp fiction novels and channels this magic. But as Chris was saying, with the man with the gun walks through the door, one of the big design decisions for Spire was to continually surprise the GM. We love being surprised as GMs, and we hate prepping. So if a player does something which generates half an hour of plot, oh great, oh that's wonderful. Because we didn't have to sit down and draw a dungeon or whatever, it all keeps it fluid and dynamic and exciting. The other class we've got is the Shadow Agent, who suffered a major mental break during training and now has no sense of self, and they can magically imprint themselves with covers to try to pass as other people for the ministry you work for, which is actually a pretty grim character class. Now I say it out loud, it's not a fun thing to be.
Yeah, like they're so deep into their cover identities that if they fall out of a second story window and break both their legs as dressed as a policeman, they can throw the cover off, which takes off the broken legs, put on a essentially go into their barmaid identity and walk away from the fall.
And then,
but if they ever go back into the policeman one, their legs are broken as a policeman.
Legs.
This is my confused face, by the way.
Yeah, that's entirely fair.
That's the thing. Like, we really like playing with not daft magic, but like it's that Ononami's thing again. It's that. Oh, I guess magic could do that. Oh, look, I mean, it happens in stories. That makes sense. And so, like, almost like we're not quite fourth wall breaking, but there's something metaphysical about messing with it, which is fun.
Yeah. It's magic has magic rather than magic as science. Sort of.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. We don't explain how it works.
A lot of the powers in the game are that heavy focus on narrative. Everybody has at least one power that they pretty much start with that gives you the power of over some of the story. Like, for instance, the Knight of the North Docks, essentially an alcoholic gangster, for want of a better way of putting it. They can at any point declare that they know a bar nearby and it's safe for the next half hour. So they can change the world around them and manipulate the game.
Sure, yeah.
So it's not just the GM telling you a story. You're putting stuff into the story as well, and you're contributing.
And hopefully we've left the system loose enough that the GM can improvise their way around that and doesn't have to, hang on a sec, I need to look up what the stats are.
So how's the Kickstarter going so far? I glanced at it last week.
It's doing all right. We're on
you seem to be doing pretty well, yeah.
$2,500, I think,
nice.
Which is nice. Which is more than we were expecting. That's outstripped all of our initial stretch goals. Because it's a supplement again for a game with no IP aside from ones we've invented. Which is a challenge.
So are you planning a whole line of supplements for the Spire, or is this just it so far? We're taking it as it goes.
As long as there's interest, essentially, our community has been very vocal in the fact that they want more Spire.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, far be it from us to stop you. So the idea is that we keep making these source books. We keep making these sort of two domains from the book. So this one was high society and low society together as source books for essentially as long as people will have us.
Yeah.
We've got other projects lined up and all sorts of other ideas percolating away. But right now we're really behind supporting Spire because, as I say, like people are so excited. Like we were amazed at how much the Kickstarters have done.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, £75,000 is astonishing. It's
a lot of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. Yeah.
It was a lot of books as well. But like one of the really interesting things with Strata, and I think why it's one of the reasons why it's doing so well on Kickstarter at the moment, is that we've got a lot of other people writing for it.
Oh yes, the 9 other authers.
We've got 9 other authors.
Should mention those, maybe.
Yeah, each writing a scenario or a campaign frame or whatever scale they wanted for the book. And it was really interesting because what we did is we just put out an open call on Twitter. Send us a 100-word pitch.
Right, yeah.
So we've got like industry veterans. We've got like Kira McGran.
Yep.
Is doing a scenario for us, and it looks amazing. But we've also got people who have never written for role-playing games before. And they were hired entirely on the strength of their pitch.
Sure.
And like we're getting stuff back from them and it's astonishing.
So good. It's so exciting.
Dripping with tone and excitement. The sort of the base campaign for Spire is this revolutionary thing where you go up Spire and you take Spire and hooray, everything's lovely. We have an adventure about being kicked out of your home with an eviction notice, like that low scale. All you're doing is you're trying to defend your tenement building and the people who live in it. We've got extreme high-end beautification auctions, which are as grotesque as they sound.
We've got Midsummer Murders, but with elves.
Midsummer Murders with elves.
There's one set entirely in a single household where you all play the staff and you have to try and work out which of the elf to try and turn.
It's like Downton Abbey, but murderous. More murderous.
More murderous.
Like we've got an interesting lineup of writers and an interesting lineup of scenarios, and there's one which focuses around biscuits, which is very cool. But like there is a bakery becomes very popular with posh people and the moneyed classes, and so the ministry goes in and takes over. And how are we going to use this to overthrow the city? Which is really cool, and like, it's nice to see little different ways of looking at this. Like we've given people this sticky sort of like Perdido Street Station, Discworld sort of big, messy, not really defined city with room to explore, but also like people like there is a tone for Spire, and people can get it, which is cool, and they've got it. So we have a bunch of authors, we have a bunch of rules, we have a bunch of setting, a bunch of gorgeous art. It's worth just going to the Kickstarter and have a look at the art. We have Adrian Stone is our artist, and he's absolutely incredible. He has this
like defining vision of Spire, because we worked with him previously on a project called Unbound.
I love the layout in Spire as well.
Oh, yeah, that was Alina Sandhu.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I always have an eye for layout, because it's always I always find that's the most exciting part of producing a book is when they're laid out pages. Like
when it's a real thing.
No, not laying it out. Receiving it back from the layout.
Oh my god!
When it's like this proper physical actual thing in your hands is wonderful.
No, when it comes back and your sort of Word document and your bits of art and this and that have all been magically put together into something beautiful. That's one of the most exciting parts of producing a book for me.
So guys, we've talked previously about how people get into the role-playing game. So presumably there's going to be some people who are going to be really excited. They want to get their friends playing Spire. Like, obviously, it's going to be really easy because you write excellent system. But, like, how complex is it? If I wanted to run Spire for my friends, how much effort am I going to have to go to learning rules?
Almost none.
I'm thinking not much. Yeah.
It's going to take you like 10 minutes.
Core mechanics sort of thing, or different mechanics for different things?
Do you know Apocalypse World?
Yeah.
You're quite a fan of it, aren't you?
Imagine if it used a D10 pool that only had one move.
So essentially what you do, you get a D10 for attempting something. If you have a relevant skill, you get a D10. Yeah. If you have a relevant domain, you get a D10. And then some things can add another one where you get what's called mastery.
Yeah.
And then you roll the dice and the highest one counts.
And you consult a chart on page 7.
And depending on how well you do, you can take damage from it of various types.
Stress.
Stress it's called. And like, so it's the same roll if you're buying something as when you're doing an attack. Exactly the same roll.
Or when you're trying to sneak in, when you're trying to convince someone that you're on the level, they're all the same and they all have the same. We only ask players to roll if there's something at stake.
The stress taken is what changes it. Yeah. So if you're buying something, then it's silver stress. It costs you more money than you thought it was going to. You had to call in more favors. If it's combat, then you took damage from that. They got a blow in while you're doing it. And the entirety of the actual like hard and fast rules are, I think, 15 pages.
The classes,
in quite a big book.
Yeah.
All of the classes are self-contained, and they contain all the story and all the fiction related to them in that one thing. And it's not like there's a block of text to read. It's the powers that tell you that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the Knight of the North Docks, which I mentioned earlier, one of the powers you can take for that is Knight Admiral. And what that does is that gives you a title. So it gives you a role-playing lever to flick. You are an important person within that area. And it gives you a boat.
It also gives you reputation.
And it gives you reputation.
It gives you plus 2 reputation. So that means that you can soak more reputation damage, as it were. Okay. But it gives you a boat. And you pick, it's very pretty, it has a gun on it, or it doesn't leak. You pick one of those.
And so you learn the classes and you learn the rules and you learn the setting as you play, rather than having to have this encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on beforehand.
Sure.
You just pick it up and go.
we've also tried to keep it so like if you pick a power, because like there isn't a lot of you don't have a lot of powers. You choose 2 abilities at start up and you get 1 whenever you gain a level. And so with all of these, we've tried to make it so often when you pick something, you're signaling to the GM that you want something to happen in the game.
Yeah.
So like I've got a boat in the game. Cool. Okay. Well, we should put boats in.
Probably a good idea. Otherwise.
There's one which has like Carrion Priest, a kind of a death cult gods, priests we have, and they have one of their powers is you can talk to ghosts, and also once per game you find a ghost, because nowhere else in the book do we mention ghosts a great deal. So
we mention them, but there's not like a section about ghosts.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's all these powers, as Grant says, is a signal to the GM. I want my campaign to feature this.
Yeah. When I do this, I want to be good. I want this to matter.
Yeah.
But no, the rules are very straightforward. The biggest thing that like you'll consult the book for is fallout. So as Chris was saying, you accrue stress. Every time you take stress, there's an increasing chance, the more stress you've got, that solidifies into fallout. And that is, and so like think of stress as potential, and fallout is concrete. And so 5 blood stress is just, I'm feeling a bit winded. I've pushed myself too far. A moderate blood fallout is your arm breaks. And then what we try to do with those is we try to make them interesting and exciting, because people quite like getting hurt in RPGs. People love having misfortune upon the characters.
In Spire.
Especially
it's really weird. The masochism is astonishing.
But so like one of the
are you attracting to this game?
Well, goths. So like some of the severe fallout results for mind stress aren't like, we don't actually have you go mad and are retired, but we've got you become obsessed with one thing, and when you do that, you roll with benefits, and when you do anything else, you roll with negatives, or you turn against your cell because you're tired at the abuses that the ministry have lumped on you. And we've tried to make it so there's no sort of, you got hurt, you can't play anymore. Even that, you get knocked out and miss something important. What did you miss? That sort of thing. So we always try and have these push story forward and think of them like branches rather than blocks.
Yeah, and the fallout can be like, there's now a warrant out for your arrest.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what your face looks like because you're in the papers.
We've got special fallout, special monsters as well. Sorry, special NPCs. So there's like one. There's a what's the gang leader's name?
There's an NPC called Anastasia Gree, who's a mafia boss, but she hates the modern way of doing things, and she hates guns. So there's a special fallout when if you're going up against her and you take or her goons and you take blood stress to a certain level, she breaks your trigger finger.
And
so you can't use guns anymore.
Yeah, until it heals, and it lets us write games based around injury, which is kind of neat.
And like specific people will have these specific things they can inflict on people. It's really fun watching people suddenly go, "Oh God, I needed that finger."
If actually one of the scenarios we've got has specific fallout, which is the grannies are upset with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, the aunties. The aunties are upset with you, and you're being ostracized.
Yeah, they're disappointed in you, and they start telling people that you're terrible, and it's just this huge problem.
It's really lovely that we've managed to get that sort of rule into a fantasy role-playing game. That's really neat.
You used to be such a nice boy.
Yeah, precisely. It's precisely, and that's the thing. Like, I'd much rather have a story where it's kind of funny, and because we're all having a bit of a laugh, because you imagine I don't understand, but it's like actually the elders of the community are starting to ostracize you, and you have to explain to them and say, by the way, I'm fighting a revolution, and you can sell me out, so don't sell me out. Or I'll have to kill you. And the great thing, the thing I've noticed most about Spire is really lovely. It's really funny and quite absurd, and then horrific, and then quite funny and absurd again. And it sort of goes up and down. It continually pushes and pulls, which I quite enjoy.
A lot of emotional range, sort of thing.
Yeah, juxtaposition there.
Yeah, very much so.
I love that word.
So,
I try and squeeze it into every conversation.
That's a fine word.
Juxtaposition.
Yes.
What I did want to ask, you have got Strata on Kickstarter now. If people wanted to pick up the Spire as well, can they get that via that Kickstarter, or where should they go?
No, they can get it via the Kickstarter. Right. It's either an add-on or there's a pledge level for everything.
Yeah.
We just literally get everything we've done.
Lovely.
It's also available on our website and in quite a few shops.
Yeah, you can probably go to a gaming shop and it'll be in there, which is quite nice.
That's useful, I guess.
Yeah.
It's quite exciting. And also, if you're in the States and you want to pick up a copy of Spire, Indie Press Revolution are better because although we get slightly less money per book, you don't have to pay postage, and we do have to charge quite a lot for postage to get it over to the States, so you might as well use them.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
And do you support with like a PDF as well?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yes,
do
yes,
do
yes.
bits and mortar. And
Yeah.
anytime you buy any of our books through Kickstarter, whatever, you also get a PDF.
Yeah, we don't believe in charging separately.
Well, we will stick all the links in the show notes to everywhere you can buy the book. I presume you can get it on Drive Through RPG and all that lot as well, can you? Or?
Yeah, if you like, yeah.
And a link to your podcast again. What was your podcast called again?
Party Dice Friends.
Party Dice Friends. It's like this, but without the news, and we talk more about genitals.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
more about
A lot
Jack.
more.
Always a sound
Like a
policy.
lot.
Just like doing lovely big kisses on orcs. That's the other one. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
This morning's, to be fair, the one that came out this morning was particularly risque.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
we preview sex toys for the first half of it.
Or I shall have to give that a listen.
Yeah, it's worth
They made
it.
an avatar
Yeah,
sex
there's
toy.
Peter. Subscribe.
I've already subscribed, mate. It's too late.
Fair enough. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really,
All right.
really fun having you guys on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's goodbye from me, Russ.
It's goodbye from me, Peter.
And if you guys could just say goodbye to our listeners, we'd be so grateful.
Bye.
Aye.
That leaves a warm and
Thanks.
pleasant feeling in my heart.
Brad Howard and Chris Taylor, you've been wonderful.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much for coming
Thank
on.
you. Thank you very
Bye,
much.
guys.
My ears hurt. That was awful. The worst. I'm going to be punishing those two for this awful performance. I just have to decide whether to put them both in the Iron Maiden or have them eaten alive by sandwich ants.